One moment shattered the street silence. Spilled milk broke dignity, and a truth no one could ignore. The humidity in Silver Creek was thick enough to choke the pride out of any man. But for my advance, it was just another Tuesday. She exited the corner market, the bell above the door offering a light chime. That felt tragically optimistic. Given what was waiting for her on the sidewalk, she adjusted the weight of the brown paper sack in her arms, feeling the cool condensation of a milk carton through the thin material. She was 30, possessed of a quiet, steel-spined elegance that usually kept the world at a distance. But today the world was closing in. "Halt right there, girl. Don't you move a single muscle," a voice grated heavy with unearned importance. Maya's pulse spiked, but her movements remained deliberate. She turned to face Officer Julian Thorne, who was leaning against the fender of his cruiser with the casual arrogance of a king overlooking a conquered territory. Thorne was the kind of man who viewed his badge as a license to hunt. His eyes, 2 chips of cold flint, traveled from Maya's face down to the bag she held against her ribs. "Let's see the receipt for what's in the sack," Thorne demanded, pushing off the car and closing the distance between them. "I've been watching the door, and I didn't see you stop at the front counter." Maya felt that familiar icy hollow expand in her chest. The realization that her integrity was being interrogated, not because of her actions, but because of her heritage. She didn't let her hand shake. "I paid at the back deli counter, officer," she replied, her tone a measured shield. "The clerk's name is Elias. If you care for the truth, he's standing 10 feet behind that glass. He'll confirm it." Thorne's lip curled into a sneer that didn't reach his eyes. "You people are all poets when you're caught red-handed. You walk into these shops like you own the place, slide things into your bags, and then act shocked when the law calls you on it. It's a tired song, and I'm sick of hearing the lyrics." Around them, the town seemed to freeze. Pedestrians slowed their gait, their gazes flickering toward the confrontation before snapping away, fearful of becoming targets themselves. The silence of the onlookers was a physical weight, a collective holding of breath that offered no warmth. Maya squared her shoulders. "Refusing to shrink, you are manufacturing a crime where none exists. Officer Thorne, I am a law-abiding citizen, and I won't be slandered on a public street for doing nothing more than buying my dinner. I have as much right to walk this pavement as you do." Thorne let out a short bark-like laugh that held no humor. "Rights? You're standing in my jurisdiction talking about rights. From where I'm standing, I see a suspicious individual fleeing a scene with potential contraband." The atmosphere turned caustic. Maya gripped the paper bag until the edges began to tear. "Keep your tongue in check," she warned softly. "I have given you no cause for this hostility. Your insults are beneath the office you hold." Thorne lunged forward, invading her personal space so aggressively. She could see the broken capillaries in his cheeks. "Quiet down, you'd be smart to learn the value of a closed mouth," he hissed, his voice dropping to a predatory register. "In this county, I define what's legal. If I say you're a thief, you're a thief. Until I decide otherwise." Maya drew a long, shaky breath, summoning the courage of ancestors who had survived far worse than a small-town bully. She didn't whisper this time. She let her voice carry, projecting it toward the silent witnesses in the shadows. "You might wear the star, Julian, but you don't own the soul of this town. I've worked 3 jobs to keep my head high. I don't owe this city a penny, and I certainly don't owe you the pleasure of watching me break." Thorne's face darkened into a bruised purple. The defiance was a spark in a powder keg. He didn't just block her path, he loomed over her like a shadow. "You think you're a revolutionary? You think you can talk down to me in front of these people? You're nothing but a footnote in my report." Maya tried to pivot, seeking an escape route toward her vehicle. "I'm done participating in this theater. Move aside." Thorne's arm shot out a rigid barrier of khaki and muscle. He didn't strike her yet, but the menace was absolute. "You don't leave until I'm finished with the lesson. When people like you start thinking they're equal to the law, they need to be brought back down to earth." The crowd grew a ring of passive observers, watching the slow-motion wreck of a human being's dignity. Maya shook her head, her eyes burning with unshed tears of frustration. "This isn't police work, this is a sickness." The explosion was sudden with a violent jerk. Thorne snatched the bag from her arms. The paper shrieked as it gave way. He didn't just drop it. He hurled it against the concrete with a terrifying, senseless fury. The bread scattered into the dirt and the milk container exploded, sending a spray of white across Maya's shoes. "That's the cost of arrogance," Thorne growled. Maya reached toward the ruined food, a reflex born of scarcity and hard work. But Thorne stepped into her path, his hand hovering over his belt. "Don't you dare reach for anything. You should be thanking me that I'm only destroying your groceries. I could just as easily destroy your life." Inside Maya, something that had been under pressure for decades finally fractured. It wasn't a loss of control, but a total clarity of purpose. Her voice rang out, vibrating with a righteous, jagged edge. "You are a coward behind a piece of tin, Thorne. Everyone on this block sees you for exactly what you are. A small man with a big stick. They're just waiting for someone to say it out loud. The street fell into a vacuum of sound. Thorn didn't move a muscle, but his jaw set so hard it looked like stone. A flicker of something truly monstrous appeared in his eyes. The wounded ego of a tyrant. "What did you call me?" he asked in a voice that was barely a breath. "A bully," Maya whispered, her gaze unflinching and a disgrace to that uniform. The strike was a blur of movement. Thorn's open palm caught Maya across the jaw with a sickening wet thud. The world spun on its axis, and she felt the rough bite of the pavement as she went down. "I warned you to shut it," Thorn screamed, his voice cracking with the strain of his own adrenaline. "I was going to be lenient, but you've earned yourself a stay in a cage. Let's see how much talk you have left." After a night on a steel cot, Maya pressed her fingers to her cheek, feeling the heat and the swelling. The physical sting was nothing compared to the naked, public cruelty of the moment. She looked at the bystanders, people she had waved to, people she had lived alongside, and saw only the tops of their heads as they studied their shoes. Thorn was heaving, his chest huffing with the intoxication of total power. "Stand up, trash. We aren't done." Maya didn't move immediately. She breathed in the scent of spilled milk and hot tar, centering herself when she finally looked at him. Her voice was a cold, haunting hollow. "You can break my bones, you can throw me in a hole, but you've already lost, Julian. Because now everyone knows you're afraid of me." Thorn's eyes bulged. He looked like a man possessed. "You still have breath to waste," he spat. "You really are a slow learner." He struck her again, a backhand that sent her sliding toward the base of a street lamp. "That's how you address an officer," Thorn bellowed. "Give it to her." Thorn and a voice cracked from the edge of the square. "About time someone put them in their place." The words felt like a physical weight, heavier than the blows. Maya struggled to lift her chin, searching for a single soul who looked disgusted. She found only coldness. A single hot tear tracked through the dust on her face. It wasn't a sign of surrender, but a mourning for the town she thought she knew. Thorn saw it and let out a jagged, triumphant grin. "Look at that. The big brave woman is leaking," he mocked, crying like a beaten dog. "After all that noise, you're all the same. When the pressure hits, you won't see me beg." Maya whispered through split lips. "You'll never get that," infuriated by her stubbornness. Thorn reached down and grabbed her by the collar, hauling her upward with a jerk that nearly dislocated her shoulder. "Oh, I'm gonna get a lot more than that." "Get your hands off me," Maya screamed. Fighting against his grip, Thorn didn't let go with a grunt of effort. He threw her back down, her body hitting the ground with a dull, heavy sound. He stood over her, looking around at the gathered townspeople, his chest out, waiting for the applause he felt he deserved. But the applause never came. Instead, a figure emerged from the periphery, a man who had been leaning against a brick wall across the way. Hidden by the glare of the sun, he moved with a silent, predatory grace, cutting through the crowd like a blade through silk. His face was a mask of glacial, terrifying focus. "Take your hands off her this instant," the man commanded. The voice wasn't a shout. It was a low-frequency rumble that seemed to vibrate in the very marrow of those standing nearby. Thorn barely had time to blink before the stranger was between him and Maya, a human wall of solid muscle and silent threat. The newcomer's hands were at his sides, fingers curled into relaxed fists. His eyes locked onto Thorn's with a lethal intensity. "Touch her one more time," the man said, his voice dropping into a register of pure, unadulterated danger, "and you'll find out exactly what happens when the predator becomes the prey." Thorn's smirk evaporated. Maya looked up, her eyes wide as she recognized the silhouette. A mixture of profound relief and sudden sharp anxiety flooded her. The entire square went into a state of suspended animation. Thorn tried to puff himself up, his hand twitching toward his pepper spray. "Back off, citizen. This is an active crime scene. Interfere and you're going down with her." The man didn't flinch. He didn't even acknowledge the threat. Instead, he knelt with exquisite gentleness. Helping Maya rise, he brushed the grit from her shoulder, his touch a jarring contrast to the violence of moments before. "Are you with me, Maya?" he asked softly. She nodded, her throat too tight for speech. When he stood back up to face the officer, the air around him seemed to turn to ice. "Why did you assault my wife? What gave you the impression that you could lay hands on her?" "Walk away." Thorn let out a nervous, high-pitched titter. "Your wife, well, looks like the whole family has a problem with authority. I can process you both at the station. Maybe a few nights together will help you understand the hierarchy in this town." The stranger didn't respond with words. He reached into his leather jacket, his movements slow and telegraphed to avoid a panicked reaction. Thorn gripped his holster, but his hand froze when he saw what the man pulled out. It wasn't a gun. It was a black leather wallet that flipped open to reveal a heavy gold, shielded badge and a federal identification card. The man held it steady right in Thorn's line of sight. Look closely, officer. Read the words, then think very carefully about your next move. Thorne's eyes scanned the ID. The blood drained from his face so fast it was as if a plug had been pulled. The man standing before him wasn't just a husband, he was Commander Elias Vance, a lead investigator for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, a man whose entire career was built on dismantling people, exactly like Julian Thorne. Thorne tried to swallow, but his throat had gone dry. This is some kind of misunderstanding. He stammered, his voice losing its edge. I was following procedure. She was acting suspicious. He reached out almost reflexively to grab Maya's arm again. A desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control. Maya flinched and Elias's hand shot out, catching Thorne's wrist in a grip that looked like it could crush granite. I said, don't touch her. Elias repeated, his voice now a roar of controlled lightning. You're obstructing, Thorne yelled. Though the conviction was gone, I am the ranking officer here. Elias pulled his phone from his pocket, his eyes never leaving Thorne's. Actually, Julian, you're the lead suspect in a federal civil rights violation, and I'm about to call in the cleaning crew. He hit a speed dial. This is Vance. I have a 1021 in progress at Silver Creek Square. Assault on a federal family member and systemic abuse of power. Send the tactical unit and the regional director now. He snapped the phone shut. Thorne's grip on Maya vanished entirely. He took a staggering step back, his eyes darting toward his cruiser. As if he could simply drive away from the reality crashing down on him, Maya stepped behind Elias, finally allowing herself to lean into his strength. You can still walk into that station and turn in your badge, Elias said, his voice echoing in the eerie silence of the square. You can save the state the trouble of a trial, but one way or another your time as a king is over. Thorne tried to sneer, tried to find that old reservoir of hate. But he was empty. You think you're better than me. You're just a bigger dog in a bigger yard. 10 minutes later, the air was ripped apart by the scream of heavy-duty engines. These weren't the local town sirens. 3 black unmarked SUVs tore into the square, tires screeching as they boxed in Thorne's cruiser. A dozen men in tactical gear swarmed out, their movements synchronized and professional. Julian Thorne, the lead agent, barked. Drop the belt and lace your fingers behind your head. You are under federal arrest for felony assault under color of law. It's a setup, Thorne cried out. But the sound of the steel ratcheting around his wrists was the final period on his sentence. Maya watched as they pushed his head down and shoved him into the back of a van. There was no cheering. There was only a heavy, uncomfortable realization among the townspeople that the man they had allowed to rule them through fear was now just another prisoner of his own making. Thorne looked at Maya through the tinted glass one last time, his face stripped of its mask, revealing only the hollow terror of a man who realized he had no friends left. The legal fallout was a tidal wave. The federal investigation uncovered a decade of suppressed reports, illegal seizures, and systemic violence. Thorne didn't just lose his job, he lost his freedom, sentenced to a maximum security facility, where his former title carried no weight. As Maya and Elias walked away from the final hearing months later, the air felt lighter, the bruises were long gone, but the lesson remained etched into the heart of Silver Creek. They walked toward the car, and for the first time in years, Maya didn't look over her shoulder. She knew now that while the darkness of one man can cast a long,